Well, hello again, everyone. I promise this is the last time some of you will have to listen to me this weekend. Welcome to this wonderful place. I had not personally had a chance to be out here, and I'm just overwhelmed with the setting and the beauty, and thinking about what may happen here in the future. So I want to welcome you all and thank you for attending. And I certainly would welcome our distinguished guests. And first, I'd like to welcome Dr. Forbes, who's here, and President Bottoms. And now I'm at a loss because I was just introduced to Patty J. McShane from the class of '07, and John Roth, who's a visiting professor here. So I also want to extend a warm welcome, Janet. I know you have many members of your family and guests here, and we're glad that that has happened. And then last but not least in this beginning, to thank you. You must be overwhelmed.
I am.
This is just wonderful. It's wonderful what you're doing for the university here. So I'll give the first of many rounds of applause, please. You know, at DePauw, we're really excited about this investment into the intellectual capital that will result in richer academic challenges and multifaceted social experiences for our students. As you all know, DePauw's emphasis on ethics has enjoyed a long and deep-rooted history that extends into the classroom and beyond. The intellectual experience shared by our students and faculty will be enhanced by the work of the Institute, and will prepare our students for more productive and fulfilling lives. And without further ado, I would like to call on our president, Dr. Robert Bottoms, to take over the podium and begin the program. Thank you.
I'd like to say a word about even though this building is so new, and this is the very first event we've had here in a formal way, it's taken us several years to get here. Not so awfully long ago, Judson Green and I were in conversation with Hanson Aggregates to see about, well, we introduced a new concept to Hanson Aggregates when we were talking about the nature park and the land, almost 500 acres in the park, and that foreign concept to them was we would like for you to give it to us, as opposed to selling it to us. And then once we were able to get that done, stage two, some of us talked about a retreat center in the nature park. And then later some of us talked about, well, so many schools with DePauw's record of producing leaders have started leadership studies. Maybe we should start a program in leadership studies and build a building addressing that issue. We looked at that very hard, actually, and that began our association with Claremont McKenna because they have such a program, and we invited some of the leadership of Claremont McKenna to visit with our Board of Visitors and make a presentation on how they taught leadership, and they did so. And one of the respondents to our California guest was David Smith, who was the first Carolyn and Robert Frederick visiting professor of philosophy. And we simply asked David to address what role does character play and what role does doing the right thing play in leadership. And he gave such a fan paper that it caused us to change our thinking again and say, you know, we're really not interested in leadership per se, that broad category. We're interested in an institute that would concentrate on helping our students and faculty and all of us do the right thing. And we began to realize that perhaps as faculty we are not trained in some of our specialties to talk about character development in the classroom. We realized that we need to do a lot of talking with our students to find just exactly what issues they have on their mind. But what was at really the bedrock or the foundation of what we wanted to do in the Ethics Center was continue to be a college that ought to have an opinion of the sort of people we want to produce, the kind of character we want our students to have when they are graduated. Perhaps Neil Postman said it best when he wrote, "At best, schooling is not about how to make a living. We know how to do that. We have our honors programs, we have our internships. Schooling is not about how to make a living, but about how to make a life." And to a large degree, this is what we want to talk about in this institute. John Roth has been with us when we've had now 2 years of discussion. One of the things we decided early on in working with our faculty advisory committee is that we certainly don't want to be an institute that appears to be dogmatic, and I know John will mention this just a little later. If you look in your brochure and you have a chance to read it later, one of the ways we seek to avoid any kind of dogma is we're concentrating on questions students should address. What should we do? What's the right thing? How should we live? And we want dialogues around these essential questions to take place in this retreat setting. It's not an accident that we're here as opposed to on campus. We wanted an institute that would be so special and would be a retreat for faculty and students to examine together these questions mentioned in your brochure. The big chapter, though, came next when, do you remember the day Judson Green and I hosted you for lunch in the University Club in New York City? And we began to talk about some of these concepts, and I remember that meeting very well, because it was a fast meeting, and we laid out what we wanted to do, and we asked Janet if she would support this idea, and you said yes. That was a very happy day. And then we began to talk about what sort of building should we have. And one of the things that Janet took the leadership role in was having a LEED certified building. And so this building already, before we even occupied it, had a very prominent place in the Indianapolis paper not more than 2 weeks ago when these lines were written about this building. When the Janet Prindle Institute for Ethics opens this month at DePauw University in Greencastle, it will be one of the first buildings in central Indiana to pursue certification for its environmentally friendly and energy efficient design. That's what Janet requested of us. And then we went into the next chapter, where she and several trustees were organized on a committee to have a national competition with architects who would hear sort of what we envisioned. And we had architects from New York and Virginia and from the Northwest and from San Antonio, Texas, respond after they heard us talk about our program with various designs. And we chose Lake Flato, the Lake Flato firm from San Antonio, Texas, and David Lake and Andrew Herdig were involved in many conversations before this building was designed. And I think Andrew, in fact, I know Andrew is here. Yeah, and several folks in their firm. We had a lot of conversations. It was fun as they worked with us. We talked about what do we want to do. We want to have seminars. We want to have a lecture hall. We want to have offices for faculty and for faculty research. We want to have comfortable places to chat. We want it to invite dialogue and conversation. And so with this in mind, the building was designed. And then CSO, architectural firm in Indianapolis, with Dan Moriarty and Randy Shoemaker and Jennifer Lake. And if they are around, if you'd hold up your hands, I saw Randy, began to take over and do the local work on this facility. But obviously, after all these meetings, all these discussions, all our dreams, all our hopes, it wouldn't have been possible without Janet, and I'll say a little more about her in a moment. But first, let me introduce to you John Roth. We are in John Roth's debt. He has been working with us. He is here for this year in residence as the Frederick Visiting Professorship in Ethics. But John and I and a faculty committee began to talk about this facility and this program months ago. And he has been a real leader in shaping the programs you'll read about in your brochure, because we sought to find a place to become a place where faculty, not only at DePauw, but from colleges across the country, might come think together about how to build character in undergraduate students. John is a former Case Professor of the Year. He taught philosophy at Claremont McKenna since 1966. He just retired there and moved to Greencastle, Indiana. A nice promotion for John. He received his master's and his PhD at Yale. John has authored or co-authored or edited over 40 books. He is a specialist in Holocaust studies and human rights issues. He has become a teacher of mine. I have sat in on a session of his study group, and it is so helpful to have the view of someone outside this community reacting to the ideas we want to put in place. So John, if you would come now and talk perhaps a few moments about a faculty perspective on this institute.
When someone much needed arrives, when something takes place that can make an immense difference, we often say, "She arrived just in time," or "That happened not a moment too soon." This is how I think of Janet Prindle and the magnificent DePauw University Institute for Ethics that bears her name. I make those claims because those of us who teach and do research at DePauw and other universities and colleges carry out our work in perilous times. A few years ago, I was invited to give a beginning of the year talk to first-year students as they entered Claremont McKenna College. My remarks incorporated a poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, which includes these lines: "The world is a beautiful place to be born into if you don't mind happiness not being so very much fun, if you don't mind a touch of hell now and then, just when everything is fine." Using Ferlinghetti's poem as a point of departure, my theme for the freshmen on that late summer evening was that we should take nothing good for granted. My talk ended, everyone left, the students went their ways, I went home. When I got up the next morning, I found myself watching hijacked planes turned into Al-Qaeda missiles as they attacked the World Trade Center and changed the world not for the first or last time, but decisively nonetheless. I hope and trust that nothing resembling 9/11 will take place tomorrow morning, but Ferlinghetti's observations about the fragile and even problematic beauty of the world are important because our lives have been affected by World War II and the Holocaust, civil rights struggles and nuclear threats, Vietnam and Watergate, ethnic cleansing in the former Yugoslavia, genocide in Rwanda and Darfur, bloodshed in Afghanistan and Iraq, militant religious fundamentalism, the ravages of colonialism, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and other human rights atrocities, business scandals, and natural disasters of one kind or another, and the inconvenient reality of global warming and climate change. That's a short list of the perils that have existed and continue to be all too real in our times. There are no signs that this list will get shorter, let alone that it will end anytime soon. We faculty educate our students and ourselves in perilous times. In such times, places are needed where there can be inquiry and discourse about critical issues of our time, where in particular we faculty members can more fully be and become those who, in the words of the American poet Adrian Rich, bind, join, reweave, cohere, replenish, teach, advise, persuade, weigh arguments, so that, as she puts it, the work of perception can advance the never-to-be-finished, still unbegun work of repair. In my judgment, the Prindle Institute for Ethics is destined to be a preeminent place of that kind. My affirmation stands on the conviction that the DePauw University faculty and administration will take the responsibility that makes that aim reality. Such responsibility entails that the hallmark of this place will be questions and thoughtful inquiry about them. The heartbeats of ethics, those questions include: what should we do? What is right? Am I doing my best? How should we live? Just in time, not a moment too soon, the Prindle Institute for Ethics will enable DePauw University, its faculty, administration, and students to consider profoundly, in the words of Henry David Thoreau, and this quote is on the front of your brochure, the way in which we spend our lives. Let us consider, Thoreau said, how we spend our lives. Martin Luther King Jr. wisely warned that our lives end the day we become silent about things that matter. The Prindle Institute is a precious thing that has been put largely into the hands of the DePauw University faculty. The Institute, I believe, will nourish and inspire us. In turn, what the faculty does here and then beyond these walls will bring honor to this place by keeping attention focused on the things that matter most.
Well, the faculty side, we're a little ahead. It was easier for us to conceive faculty development programs, discussion groups, the kind of things that will now be happening in this building as you tour it. It's easy to design the faculty offices. It was easy to think about the kind of research and products that ought to be produced here that are described in your brochure. But one of the really important questions is, well, okay, what will the Institute do for our students other than to allow them to take the courses that are developed in our work? The person I've relied on to advise us is Patty McShane. Patty is chairing a committee of students who are just beginning to learn about how the Institute might impact their lives. Questions they have they would like for the Institute to address. How to structure conversations between faculty and students. How to author the programs for students that will take place in these conference halls and in these seminar rooms. Patty is from Salem, Oregon. She was graduated last spring, summa cum laude, from DePauw. She had a double major in philosophy and economics. And she will share some of her conversations and some of her thoughts about the impact the Prindle Institute will have on students. Patty?
Last May, I sat out on East College lawn, proudly awaiting my turn to walk across the stage, shake President Bottom's hand, and take hold of the diploma that symbolized 4 great years spent at DePauw. However, as I sat listening to the words of Karen Abuzayed, our commencement speaker, my eager sense of accomplishment became tempered by a sense of great responsibility. Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, Mrs. Abuzayed, had committed herself to finding practical solutions to the urgent challenges facing our world. Her dedicated humanitarian career motivated Ms. Abuzayed last May to issue a challenge to the crowd of soon-to-be graduates. She said to us, "I urge you to take up the challenge to try to change the world for the better, and to do so being fully aware that there are no instant answers and that the problems facing your generation will yield only to patience, persistence, cooperation, and comprehensive approaches. Progress is possible," she said, "even if it's agonizingly slow." Mrs. Abu Zayed's words were a great reminder that my diploma symbolizes not only the accomplishment of 4 years spent at DePauw, but that my diploma also carries with it a responsibility to use my DePauw experience to build and serve, in some capacity, the whole range of institutions upon which our complex society and world depend. DePauw has a strong tradition for preparing students to fulfill this type of responsibility. As Mrs. Abu Zayed said of her own experience, the DePauw environment gave me a lifelong thirst for knowledge, along with a penchant to question conventional wisdom with healthy skepticism. From my own personal experience, I can attest that while at DePauw, I have developed a passion for my academic studies. I have found many caring mentors amongst the faculty and staff. I have made the best friends of my life, and I have taken advantage of many wonderful and unique opportunities. But I must also admit that along this journey, I have encountered many challenges, from issues of personal ethics, such as what it means to be a good friend and roommate, to concern for pressing global issues, such as the pervasive hunger and poverty I encountered during the 2 winter terms I spent in Central America. I stand in front of you today confident that the Janet Prindle Institute for Ethics will serve as an outstanding resource for other students as they encounter these sorts of ethical challenges. It will do so by offering students the opportunity to explore their beliefs and values as they interact with distinguished scholars like John Roth, as they benefit from lectures, reading groups, and symposia. Last year, I had the good fortune of taking an Ethics of Globalization course with the visiting Frederick Professor of Ethics, Dr. Max Stackhouse, who's here today. One day, I was feeling particularly disheartened after a class discussion of poverty. However, on that day, Dr. Stackhouse ended class saying, "Humans thus have some residual capacity to recognize the right and seek the good, in spite of the fact that neither we ourselves nor the conditions under which we live have kept this image undistorted." Those words helped shift my perspective from one of cynicism to one of hope and wonder. It helped me to realize that even in the face of pressing global challenges, like the ones Professor Roth mentioned, there still exists an opportunity to progress, to recognize the right and seek the good. I believe that the Institute will serve the same role for other DePauw students as Dr. Stackhouse's words served for me on that day. It will help students to face what, as an aspiring ethicist, I believe to be the most difficult questions we face: what is good, what is right, and what is just. With the help of Professor Rainbolt, chair of the Faculty Advisory Committee, who has worked tirelessly to bring the Institute and its aims to life, I recently formed a student advisory committee. At our second meeting, I asked the students to explain their vision for the Institute. One student explained, "Simply put, the Institute will be a place where students, faculty, and staff feel comfortable stepping outside of their typical comfort zones to tackle and call into question the large ethical dilemmas of our time." I wholeheartedly agree with this student's sentiments, and I would like to thank Mrs. Prindle for contributing such a wonderful resource to our campus. A resource that will undoubtedly help the students who will, in the years to come, fill the seats on East College lawn to live up to Mrs. Abu Zayed's challenge. A resource that will help students to make even more of their DePauw experience as they try and change the world for better. Thank you.
Well, Janet, you should know by now we like you. Janet was a pioneer for women on Wall Street. She was the first woman to be made a partner at Neuberger Berman. One of the things that she has done is successfully dispel the idea that socially conscious investing means that you have lackluster performance. Janet has been on the DePauw University Board of Trustees since 1990. If it were not for Janet, we would probably not have a women's studies program, which she started. She's been an influential member of our investment committee and now she's made this wonderful institute possible. Janet?
Thank you. First of all, let me say that I'm delighted to be here. More than that, I'm delighted you all are here. This is a big day for me, and many of you here are the most important people in my life. So what got us here today? About 5 years ago, my very good friend Bob Wells shared a 12-page proposal he had sent to Bob Bottoms with an unusual idea for using a 500-acre site DePauw might acquire south of the campus. Bob's original idea was to establish an Institute for World Understanding. To think, a competing idea for using the property was to develop a golf course. Now, I'm a golfer, but what a waste that would have been for DePauw. Anyway, after reading Bob's proposal, I knew that I needed to get involved. But the one thing I've learned about working with Bob Bottoms, when you volunteer to get involved, you find yourself involved big time. The concept of establishing an institute was aimed at transforming the very nature of DePauw University, putting it on a different plateau, making DePauw a destination for critical inquiry and discourse, engaging DePauw in forming new thinking to resolve critical problems. As discussions progressed, the focus for the Institute turned to ethics, ethics in the broadest sense of the word. Ethics as it relates to all our lives, through business, government, personal morality, human rights in a global society, religion and belief systems, climate change, a list that goes on and will continue to go on in ways we can't even predict today. So why me? I've had the very good fortune of having a successful career. And now, frankly, I'm blessed with having more than I need. So the issue for me was either to give money away when I die, or to do so while I'm still alive, so I can gain satisfaction from seeing it make a difference for a place that I love. You now know which course I decided to take. Viewed from another perspective, everything I've done in my career, as well as my life, has had an ethical context. With Neuberger Berman, I created a socially responsive fund comprised of companies with highly ethical practices. Companies that didn't pollute, ones that treated their employees well. While some fund managers might have advocated simply making a lot of money, then convincing investors to give part of the proceeds away for good causes, the motto for my fund was, doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. With that ethical North Star, we were able to successfully manage a fund which is now worth over $1.5 billion. Now, looking at what we are dedicating today, I see it as a natural extension of my lifelong interests. I personally believe the Institute for Ethics will be a major factor in helping to develop DePauw graduates who will be better prepared to make positive differences in our complex world. All of the planning to date, this beautiful design for the building, not to mention the unbridled enthusiasm of the faculty, visiting scholars, and the broader DePauw community have truly been inspiring. And the icing on the cake, when Bob Bottoms asked me to take a little walk, little did I know that he would agree to become the Institute's guiding light. If there's anything possible to help ensure success of the Prindle Institute, it's knowing Bob will steer it steadily on its way. So to my father, who taught me the value of giving something back, please know that I'm doing something good, certainly good for the family name. And to all of you, please understand how pleased I am to be here on this wonderful day and delighted you are here sharing it with me. Thank you.
When Janet and I were discussing this program, I suggested to her that it might be appropriate to have someone from New York City. And we did begin to think about who that person might be. And we came to the realization we would like to invite the Reverend Dr. James A. Forbes. Now, Jim Forbes is the first African American to serve as senior minister of Riverside Church. That is certainly one of the most famous pulpits in the country. It's interdenominational, interracial, and an international church that most of you know was built by John D. Rockefeller in 1927. What you will soon discover in listening to Dr. Forbes is that prior to his pastorate at Riverside Church, he was a professor of preaching, and I promise you he has mastered the art. In 1996, Newsweek magazine called him one of the 12 most effective preachers in the English-speaking world. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from Howard University, a Master of Divinity degree from Union Seminary in New York, and a Doctor of Ministry degree from Colgate-Rochester Divinity School. He has 13 honorary degrees awarded to him, and I'm proud to say that one of those is from DePauw's University when we awarded him the Doctor of Humane Letters degree in 1990. After his so-called retirement last spring, and I think this is something we have in common, is we're going out of one thing, we're inheriting great opportunities to do other things. Dr. Forbes has now become president of the Healing of Nations Foundation. Its goal is very similar to some of the goals we have for the Prindle Institute. It's to create a national ministry and movement that promotes spiritual revitalization and the healing of our country. And in closing, let me just say about Jim Forbes, the image, which is the symbol of the Foundation's work, is drawn from a passage in the book of Revelation in the New Testament. The passage says, "And the leaves of the tree are for the health of the nations." And he's written that to be a leaf means to make a commitment to be an instrument of healing and growth and wholeness. In some way, that's one of the essential missions of the Prindle Institute. For we too, like those associated with your foundation, hope to attract individuals from across all faiths and all cultures, people with similar beliefs and different beliefs, to come to this place to study how we can make meaningful contributions to a more healthy world. Jim, it's a privilege to have you at DePauw this day. The topic of his address is genetic wisdom, personal morality, and public policy. Jim?
Dr. Bottoms, Chair of our board, and to the participants, first faculty and then student, and the founding benefactor for this marvelous experience we are sharing here today, Janet Prindle. Thank you so very much for the privilege to be a part of something which could be a sign of better things ahead. For if we stop and think about what we are doing and ask the right questions about what's possible, it could be that even the difficulties of this present hour will begin to open up and let the world in its beauty, in its contrasting beauty, speak of better things ahead. Thank you so very much. Now, let me say a word about how happy I am to be here. Whoever wrote this brochure ought to be in advertising, because just reading the brochure spoke of the beauty of the architecture, environmental, technological conformity to our highest ideals, talked about what was going to happen here, a place of inquiry, not of dogmatism, a place where students and faculty and those who are beyond the DePauw community could come, take time, wrestle with the thorny issues of the day, to finally come to wisdom by which we may pass on another, more beautiful world to our children. To read in this is like, well, the truth is, I'm a strange kind of guy. I'm the kind of guy who really gets excited just thinking about the immune system of the body. I think of the words of the psalmist, how wonderfully and fearfully we are made, just thinking about how God has built into our very bodies a remarkable healing and transforming capacity that we don't even take notice of. But when I started to read the brochure, I came across words that just stirred me up. A place for inquiry, a place where you spend time in dialogue about the precious and challenging issues of the day. A place where people can come, relax, and yet be engaged to the point of discovering, out of dialogue with diverse perspectives, what may be a path for the days ahead. So just reading it, I could hardly wait. And when I arrived, I said, yes, this is not only advertising, it isn't fraudulent advertising, it's really truthful. What a beautiful space, and how settled we are. The space says yes to the environment, and it says yes to the better angels of our nature, and I say yes to being here. Now the question is, how do you actually dedicate a space like this? How do you get the audacity to move beyond Lincoln and say, you know, we can dedicate, we can consecrate, we can hallow these grounds? And what I thought is that we who have gathered here today would go a long way in dedicating this space for its mission if we, even in our programmatic response, could say yes to the purpose for which this space was established. Having thought that way, I decided that what I was going to do was to ask you to go along with me in a somewhat varied approach to saying yes to the mission, yes to the space, yes to the technology, yes to the ecological sensitivity of this space. So, in the little time that I have, and although my members will tell you taking off my watch doesn't usually mean much, but I'm going to take it off. And what I would like in the brief time that we have together is to ask you, in joining me, in focusing on issues that really need to be discussed and for which light is desperately needed in our time. I want you to do that. Also, I would like for you to explore what kind of response to a particular issue I will raise, and I'll tell you why I raise the issue. What kind of response is called for in our time? What can we do? What questions do we need to wrestle with in order to be able to answer these questions? I will also ask you to do one thing more, in addition to focusing on issues in general, responding to a particular issue I want to raise. I would like to ask you to open yourselves to emotional intelligence. That word is found in this book. And also what I call ethical imagination about what we might be able to do, and even risk a gesture or a ritual by which we indicate, because we are at the Prindle Institute for Ethics, we leave here today already touched by its magic and its mandate for peace and justice and hope and reality. So let me tell you how I decided to get started with you here today. I called my people who do work for me when I get ready to think about what I ought to do. And I asked them, what should I talk about? What are the pressing issues of the day? And they responded to me with a long list of 11 things. And I decided that I wasn't going to read the list of 11. I was going to just pick the one that they started with. The one they started with had to do with achieving a level of health for all God's children. And the one they ended with in 11 was finding a way to move beyond the constancy of fear and anxiety in this age of terror. Now let me tell you why I picked the first one. The reasons are very, very clear. The first reason I picked it is because I had fairly recently looked at the fact that our government was engaged in dealing with the issue of health in the form of whether there would be the reauthorization of the S-CHIP program, the State Child Insurance Program. I thought right about the time that I get to DePauw, we will either have done it or we will not have done it. And if we have not done it, there will be those who will have reasons why they didn't do it. And if we had done it or had not done it, there were those who would say there were reasons why we should not have done it. And that I could qualify for fitting in the spirit of this place if I would come not primarily trying to engage in the polarization. For is our world not already filled with polarization, fragmentation, alienation, and we need something that might bring us together? So I thought the first thing, let's talk about health. And the second reason why I wanted to talk about health is because health is a part of my own outlook for life. For you see, I went to school to be a medical doctor. I majored in chemistry, and at a certain point in my career, I finished my chemistry course. My brother yesterday at a conference where we were said it was organic chemistry that got me a call to the ministry, and that's not true. It's not true. I've always wanted to be engaged in health issues, and when I was wrestling with this choice, I'm going to be a medical doctor, am I going to be a preacher? During that time, I used to sing in my college choir at Howard University, and then after Sunday service, I would go down to Freedman's Hospital, and I would visit people in the hospital that I did not even know, and I would pray for them. And I'd say, see, Lord, if you let me be a medical doctor, I'll be a religious medical doctor. But that didn't work. The Lord called me to be a preacher and says, you're going to be a healer, but you're going to be a different kind of healer. That's why in this new space, in a place dedicated to dialogue, reflection, with respect for multiplicity of perspectives, I thought, let me just raise this issue and do so recognizing that if we had a long time, like a whole semester, we could actually put together a course in which we could deal week by week with the implications of how we really make a difference in regards to health. Now, the third reason why I wanted to talk about health is I did have the opportunity to go to the Clinton Global Initiatives this year. Oh, that's a high and heady context at the Sheraton in New York City. And the group that I was put into was the position on global health. So that's the third reason why I wanted to talk about health. But really, quite honestly, the last reason why I wanted to talk about health is that that's the work that I'm doing now that I've retired from the Riverside Church. So why not try it out, road test it at the Prindle Institute, because that's going to happen a lot in this place. So that's what I want to talk about. And let me therefore tell you, as the president has already indicated, that when I retired from the Riverside Church, the New York Times says I strutted around on the platform like a bantam. I thought I was more like a peacock, but anyway, they said like a bantam. But what I did when I left my congregation June the 6th, I had retired on June the 1st, I managed to say, the Lord has given me a new vision. And what I want to do now that I'm retired is to go around the United States and the world asking people to agree to be a leaf. And I, knowing that the Floral Club president does not like for anybody to mess with her flowers, I managed to go over to the palms that were on the platform and take one. And I said, what I want to do is remembering the words in Ezekiel about a tree by the river that was flowing, where there would be food every month, and the leaves were for healing. And in the book of Revelation, it also said, and there was a river flowing through the middle of the streets of the city, and on either side the tree of life. And the tree brought forth fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nation. And I thought I heard the Spirit saying to me, your job is to go across the United States and encourage people to become leaves. Leaves meaning, one, that you would be conscientious with respect to your health, holistically understood, and that you would also be willing to let the Spirit lead you to find a way to be an instrument of healing for some situation beyond that which is immediately your own personal interest. And so, I think I was inspired. Because, Janet, there's no question but that according to that definition, you have taken good care of your personal health, and it has allowed you to retire at an age where you're looking like the flowers behind us, still in bloom. So I just say, this is what you are. You are a leaf. Mr. President, Lord knows, even though words about retirement are being aired around, you are a leaf. Now, to fit within my time frame, what I have to do quickly is to begin to ask you to remember that health is an issue that concerns us all, and I would like to have you grant me the opportunity to suggest what it might be like for you to be a leaf. And as I deal with the issue of health, I want to play around like I'm a teacher and say it was Tuesday, September 18th, when I was reading the New York Times science section. I'm a science man. I always reach for that on Tuesdays. And in that paper was an article that was entitled, "Is Do Unto Others Written into Our Genes?" A fascinating article. Jonathan Haidt had written it out of a book called Happiness Hypothesis, The Happiness Hypothesis, in which he said, all of us, and this is why I'm going to call us to be a leaf, look out for ourselves, but also to find a way to be an instrument of healing to others. He said that there is within each of us that intuitive moral system of the subconscious mind, which he called an elephant. This is a big elephant, wired inside of us. And that we sit upon the elephant, having to deal with the subconscious, intuitive, moral system inside ourselves. And we find with our best thought, our ethical and moral deliberations and rationalizations, we find plausible rationalizations for what our inner sense of morality might be. He listed 5 areas. He said, in most of us, all of us, hardwired, as a result of the evolutionary process, that there is inside each one of us something that has to do with an intuitive sense of what's pure and what's sacred. Also, inside each one of us, there is something that operates without our even thinking of it, about loyalty to our in-group. Black folks do it with black folks, white folks do it with white folks, Latinos do it, Native Americans do it, Europeans do it. That there's something that makes us much more committed, at least from the beginning, to response to the in-group. Also, there is inside each one of us a kind of built-in, over the eons, respect for authority. And then there is also, for us, something in this species, Homo sapiens, that says we should not do physical harm to others. Though if we do, we will always accommodate it by finding the rationalization for why we do. And also, everybody, without even having yet become fully grown, just the zygote in your mother's womb, going through the process of mitosis, already inside is something that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, it may not be the dominant gene going most of the time. In fact, self-preservation may more frequently seem to be the dominant one, but for all of us, it's in there. And my work is to really say, let's try it on. So the first area that I would like, and by the way, even Jung thought that this was right. He talks about how the living spirit grows, and it even outgrows itself. The living spirit, he says, is eternally renewed and pursues its goal in manifold and inconceivable ways through the history of humankind. He said mankind, I say humankind. Then he said, measured against it, the names and forms which men and women have given to it mean little. People are only the changing leaves and blossoms on the stem of the eternal tree. So then, suppose we start out. I've already suggested to you that there is genetic wisdom. The proposal that I am making, according to what Brother Jonathan said, that there is within every human being something that will incline them to really take care of themselves. And praise the Lord for that. But also in every human being, there is, though all may not be able to live it out as you, the philanthropic impulse. Folks have some sense that they ought to make a contribution. In that way, I say that everybody is a philanthropist. Some with massive deeds and great, some with ornament of rhyme. Nothing useless is or low. Each thing in its place is best. And so we all are engaged in trying our best to do the both. And there are the other three too, but we're going to look out for ourselves, and we're going to look out for the history of a community evolving towards greater health. So then, I say that if we were going to be a leaf in regards to personal health, holistically understood, in a place like this, we might discuss what does it mean to be personally healthy. I would even think that in a unit, we would ask, given who you are, your genetic inheritance, and later on with the Genome Project giving us much more insight about what's going on, for you, what is your vision of being personally, holistically healthy? Obviously, there's a physical aspect to it, but there must also be a mental aspect. There's got to be an emotional aspect. There's got to be a relational aspect, relationship even to oneself, relationship to family, relationship to community, relationship to others, those who are similar to us and those who are different. We need a vocational sense of health. We need it nationally, we need it globally, we need it environmentally, and because I was a preacher, I saved this one for last. We need it spiritually. To be healthy is not just to be able to get a good report from the doctor. To be a healthy human being is to recognize that we are composed of or constituted out of multiple aspects, and that it is as we learn to balance both that which is self-regarding and other-regarding that we become more healthy than otherwise we might have been. And of course, the issue is, if we really want to look at it in terms of morality and ethics, how does an individual who has not yet attained the level of the abundance of life that was intended, how do you get to it? Quickly, here's one of the ways. Number one, I think we are all called upon to learn how to honor genetic wisdom. Actually, that's the cards we were dealt. You gotta deal with it. Whatever you were given, you must take it and make it the best you can. I wrote this little poem about this one time. I was thinking out of Psalm where it says, we are fearfully, wonderfully made, that you really can't be healthy until you are able to affirm and celebrate your own DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, the microchip of our genetic possibilities. You got to feel pretty good about it. So I used to say, thank you for my DNA. Yes, thank you for my DNA. It took an artist divine to make this design and fashion it all the way. Thank you for my DNA. Yes, thank you for my DNA. You gave the design. Now I'm making it mine. Thank you for my DNA. What would it take to create values in the world so that every creature God made can have a sense of celebration of his or her own DNA and work with it the best that you can? But also one needs to cultivate some values. And not only values traditionally understood, but we need, in addition to our values, to have the power of agency. What kind of raising of children, educating of young people, sustaining of those who are in the twilight years of life, what is it that gives them a sense of agency? I can make my life more sublime. I can make my world a better place in which to live. To be healthy is to not only celebrate your DNA, but to recognize that somehow I hold the key to certain possibilities. I can turn it, and I can make a difference. And of course, in addition to cultivating values and the sense of agency, we need to have the courage to be whole persons in the face of the threat to our well-being. It is Reinhold Niebuhr that says that's really at the heart of sinfulness when we talk about morality. In Larry Rasmussen's book on Reinhold Niebuhr as public theologian, he said that Niebuhr was often considered the man who always talked about pride, but he had another little motif never fully developed that said, at the heart of human sinfulness, and he said, man, is man's unwillingness to trust the security which God offers. That's what he said. And Erik Erikson did not go far behind it in his development in childhood and society, the 8 stages of human development. He says number 1 is trust. Somehow one has to be able to trust. How do you create a world where the experiences of people growing up allows them to trust that the world they live in is space for grace? We will have to discover how to do that. We are not doing that everywhere in the world. There are many people who have contempt for themselves, and their behavior becomes a menace to the rest of those who are doing even better. We've got to figure out how to do that. Well, the vision of my being healthy is what being a leaf is about. I today commit myself to the multiple dimensions of my being, that insofar as it lieth within me, I'm going to be a leaf, and that means I'm going to be whole. Well, I think my time is coming near, so I'd better shift to the next level of being a leaf. To be a leaf is also to have some commitment to becoming a channel of energy for the healing of others. There is an African American proverb that says, I am because we are. Genetic wisdom does not counsel us to abandon self-care. That would be foolhardy. I think it does go on to say that life is a medium of exchange. I liked The Web of Life by Fritjof Capra, where he says, guess what, folks? Life is always a medium of exchange, and that we only live as there is input and that there is also output. We are nourished and we also offer off. And what we receive, we give to the other, which is to suggest that this leaf, and I'll borrow yours, that when I breathe, I am nourishing the leaf. My carbon dioxide goes and is a wonderful full-course meal, along with what the sunlight and the other nutrients of the earth. And when I breathe in oxygen, the leaf has had the effect of the oxygen mask on my face in the hospital. We receive and we give. One who ceases to receive and give is already dead. I think it's important that we learn to affirm the importance of receiving and giving. I put it this way during a little piece of poetry. I said, I'm a novice when it comes to receiving. Giving has become my expertise, but giving alone without getting becomes soon a fatal disease. If the intake valve is not opened, there's no way to maintain a supply. There comes a point in the cycle of life when the outgoing stream runs dry. Straining out love from a vacuum is like drinking from the heart of a stone. Try as we may, at the end of the day, we're frustrated, exhausted, alone. Better to give than receive, we've been taught. But another truth I've learned just by living: only the soul with the grace to receive excels in the fine art of giving. We got to give and take. I mean, it's so fundamental that for children, parents teach them to give and to receive. And they're always receiving, and they teach them you must also share. There's a little children's poem, and this is the last poem, I guess, for today. The little children's poem that I'm working on. I like to write children's songs, and it goes like this. I made heaven so happy today, receiving God's love and giving it away. When I looked up, heaven smiled at me. Now I'm so happy, can't you see? I'm happy, look at me. I'm happy, can't you see? Sharing makes me happy, makes heaven happy too. I'm happy, look at me. I'm happy, can't you see? Let me share my happy, loving smile with you. See, that little child in me learns that you got to give and share as you also receive. But alas, we do not have the full time for a whole course. So let me take you back to where I began. And I began talking about the Congress. Now, I have a brother-in-law in Congress. I have many friends in Congress. But what I want to do is to propose, while I have the president here. Mr. President, I want to close by asking, will it be possible to invite the entire Congress to the Prindle Institute for Ethics, and in it, while they're debating what to do about health for the nation, we would get Dr. Roth to teach, 13 weeks, with each of these questions, with which I am now preparing to close. When they come, they will have to deal with these ethical issues because it's the Prindle Institute for Ethics. We'll ask each one, what is your vision of health, wellness, and wholeness for yourselves, for your kinfolks, and for the world? Ask them another week, what are the persisting threats to the mutuality of respect necessary to realize the contours of your vision? What are the most effective ways to address the issues of evil oppression, exploitation, and domination? Is any one person's life of greater worth than others, and therefore more deserving of the necessities of life? What would a just distribution of resources look like in times of plenty and in times of scarcity? To whom do the resources of the earth belong, and what are the life-sustaining ways persons may access what they need without denying others their fair share of life-saving resources? And, Mr. Congressman, what ought to be done about health disparities on account of race and class and color and age and gender and culture and national origins? And how are these issues affected by war, genocide, or use of economic weapons of mass destruction? And how are scientific discoveries, as in genome or stem cell, how are they safeguarded against greed, selfishness, racial supremacy, and nationalistic pride? And what rights should people have in regard to sexual expression, reproductive health, and societal regulatory constraints in these matters? And what wise contracts should a thriving society establish with other nations and the environment? And for what should a person be willing to sacrifice or die? And finally, how should we respond to evil without becoming like the evil we deplore? 13 weeks, we could get the bills passed. Now, I'm closing, but I have to do something. In the Prindle Institute, you just can't come and listen. You've got to act, because the action is towards the common good according to this brochure. So I ask you to do two things for me right now. All of you who have heard me make a speech, and you've thought about it, if you are sort of willing to think about it, would you accept this thesis? That you are the bearer of healing power inside yourself for yourself, but there is also in your eyes, in your smile, in your thoughts, in your hands and your feet, and your power and your influence. You also are capable of making a significant difference in this world. Now I want you to do two things. First, if you think that you could be a healing influence, I simply ask you to turn to the person you're near and say, the power of healing in me wishes healing and wholeness for you. Do that. Just do that. And finally, this is it. One leaf can have some impact, but when a collectivity and a critical mass of people are committed to healing themselves as best they can and offering healing influence to others, I want to show you what it might feel like. Let's, for the time being, and I always have to watch that I do not show political preference by the way I do this, let's all lean this way. Come on, this way. And now let's lean this way. If a critical mass of us could lean towards health and wholeness and healing together, we could slightly righten the world on its axis, and it would have all have started at the Prindle Institute of Ethics.
Well, the first thing I'll say is yes to you. That was inspiring and wonderful, and I can't imagine, Janet, that you could think of a better way to start than this. Thank you so much, Dr. Forbes, for being with us today. And Janet, I just can't imagine how you must feel about all of this. And I was sitting here thinking about 50 years from now, what great people there may be in the world as a result of this. Thank you very much. I'd like to also thank Dr. Bottoms, who's kind of my boss, I think. He tells me I'm his, but I think he's mine. And also Patty and John for being here and all the good things you had to say. I want to encourage everyone to walk through this lovely place and to enjoy the reception that's here. It will end promptly at 6 o'clock. We have another event starting promptly at 6:30 at the Walden Inn. There will be transportation for everyone, so we must be disciplined in the fun that we have. And That's something that I took away from DePauw University. So with that, I'd just like to again thank everyone for coming, and we all look forward to seeing what may come of this place and of the fine people that are going to staff it and to learn here. Thanks for being here.